In the bustling city of Lagos, where the streets buzzed with honking cars and the air was filled with the aroma of roasted corn and suya, there lived the Martins family. Mr. Martins worked as a civil engineer, while his wife, Mama Tolu, was a fashion designer who ran a thriving business from home. Together, they had a son, Tolu, a bright 10-year-old boy with a love for airplanes. Tolu dreamed of soaring through the clouds as a pilot. He often sat by the window of their modest home in Surulere, watching planes carve trails in the sky. One day, he would say with a wide grin, "I will fly higher than all of them." The Martins family was close-knit and full of love, but life in Lagos was fast-paced. Between work, school, and their daily routines, Mama Tolu began to feel the weight of managing the household. One evening, after a long day of sewing, Mama Tolu turned to her husband. "My dear," she said, "this house is too much for me to handle alone. Between my business and Tolu, I can't keep up with the chores. We need help." Mr. Martins agreed. "You're right. Let's find someone reliable to assist you." A week later, they hired a young woman named Beezy. She was in her early 20s, with a soft voice and an air of humility. She had come to Lagos from her village in search of work. During her interview, Beezy spoke about her struggles and how she hoped to support her younger siblings. Her story moved the Martins, especially Mama Tolu, who felt a sense of responsibility to help. At first, Beezy seemed like a blessing. She kept the house spotless, prepared delicious meals, and even helped Tolu with his homework. "Mama, Beezy is very nice," Tolu said one afternoon as he munched on chin-chin she had made for him. Mama Tolu smiled. "I told you, my dear, she will be a good helper." Beezy quickly became part of the family, and Tolu grew fond of her. She often played games with him when his parents were busy, and they shared plenty of laughs. But what no one noticed was a shadow hidden behind Beezy's friendly demeanor. As time passed, Beezy began to change. When Mr. Martins and Mama Tolu were out, her behavior toward Tolu took a strange turn. It started with subtle things. She would show him inappropriate pictures on her phone and laugh it off, saying, "It's just a joke, Tolu. Don't tell anyone." Tolu, being young and trusting, didn't understand what was happening. "But why can't I tell Mama?" he asked one day, confused. "Because she won't believe you," Beezy replied with a sly smile. "This is our little secret." The games escalated. Beezy started teaching Tolu things no child his age should know. Tolu didn't like it, but he didn't know how to stop it either. Beezy made him feel as though it was normal, something everyone did. At first, Tolu wanted to tell his parents. He tried once, but when he saw how tired his mother was and how busy his father seemed, he stopped himself. Maybe Beezy is right, he thought. They won't believe me. Over time, Tolu grew quieter. The cheerful boy who once talked about airplanes now spent hours in his room, staring out the window. He didn't know how to process what was happening to him. Beezy, meanwhile, acted as though nothing was wrong. Around Mr. and Mrs. Martins, she was her usual cheerful self, earning their trust more with every passing day. One afternoon, Tolu sat alone in his room, his heart heavy. He felt trapped, scared, and ashamed, though he didn't fully understand why. He no longer looked forward to his parents leaving for work. Every time they did, it meant more games with Beezy, and he hated it. Little did Tolu know, this secret was a thorn that would grow deeper with time, slowly changing his life in ways he could never imagine. As months passed, Tolu became a shadow of his former self. His once cheerful demeanor faded, replaced by silence and a hollow stare. At school, his teachers noticed the change. "He used to be one of our brightest," said Mrs. Adeyemi, his class teacher, during a PTA meeting. "But now, he barely participates in class." At home, Tolu avoided everyone. He spent hours locked in his room, staring out the window. Mama Tolu grew worried. "Tolu, is everything okay?" she asked one evening. But Tolu only nodded, avoiding her eyes. The Martins couldn't understand the sudden change. Maybe he's just growing up, Mr. Martin suggested, though he too felt uneasy. Beezy, meanwhile, continued her sinister games. She had become more confident, knowing Tolu wouldn't speak up. "You're a smart boy, Tolu," she would say. "You know this is our secret." Her words weighed heavily on Tolu. He felt trapped, his young mind unable to process the betrayal he experienced. He began to dread weekends, knowing his parents would be busy with errands, leaving him alone with Beezy. One day, while playing one of their games, Tolu mustered the courage to say, "I don't like this, Beezy. Please stop." But Beezy only laughed. "You'll understand when you're older," she said, brushing off his protest. One afternoon, Tolu's school organized a counseling session. The counselor, a kind woman named Auntie Yemisi, spoke about boundaries and secrets. "If someone is doing something that makes you uncomfortable, you have the right to say no," she said. "And you should always tell a trusted adult." Tolu listened intently. For the first time, he felt a spark of hope. Maybe he didn't have to keep this secret forever. But when he thought about telling his parents, fear crept in. What if they didn't believe him? One fateful evening, Mama Tolu returned home earlier than expected. She entered the house quietly, exhausted from a canceled meeting. As she approached Tolu's room, she heard muffled voices. Curious, she opened the door to find Beezy hastily stepping away from Tolu, who looked terrified. "What's going on here?" Mama Tolu demanded, her voice sharp. Beezy stammered. "Nothing, Ma. We were just playing." But Mama Tolu noticed the fear in Tolu's eyes. "Tolu, go to the living room," she said, her tone firm. Once he was gone, she turned to Beezy. "What have you been doing with my son?" Beezy, caught off guard, tried to deny everything. But the seed of doubt had been planted in Mama Tolu's mind. That night, Mama Tolu spoke with Mr. Martins. "I feel like something is wrong," she said. "Tolu has changed so much, and I think Beezy has something to do with it." Mr. Martins was skeptical. "Beezy has been nothing but helpful," he argued. "Why would she harm Tolu?" But Mama Tolu insisted. "I saw the look in Tolu's eyes. We need to talk to him." With gentle coaxing, Tolu finally opened up to his parents. Tears streamed down his face as he recounted what had been happening. "She told me not to tell you," he sobbed. "She said you wouldn't believe me." Mr. Martins and Mama Tolu were devastated. The guilt of not noticing earlier weighed heavily on them. "We're so sorry, Tolu," Mama Tolu whispered, hugging him tightly. The next morning, the Martins confronted Beezy. At first, she denied everything, but under pressure, her facade crumbled. She begged for forgiveness, claiming she didn't mean any harm. But Mr. Martins was furious. "You betrayed our trust," he said. "You will answer for this." They dismissed Beezy immediately and reported the incident to the authorities. Though shaken, the Martins were determined to ensure justice was served. Even after Beezy was gone, the scars she left behind remained. Tolu struggled with feelings of shame and confusion. He found it hard to trust anyone and withdrew even further into himself. One evening, he asked his mother, "Am I bad, Mama? Is it my fault?" Mama Tolu's heart broke. "Oh, my dear boy," she said, holding him close. "None of this is your fault. You are brave for telling us." Mine to help their son heal, the Martins sought professional counseling for Tolu. Slowly but surely, he began to open up about his feelings. The counselor, Auntie Yemisi, became a guiding light for him, helping him navigate his emotions. But the road to recovery was long, and the Martins knew they had to be patient. As Tolu began his journey toward healing, the Martins faced another challenge. Whispers of the incident began to spread in their neighborhood. Some neighbors were supportive, while others gossiped behind their backs. "Did you hear what happened in the Martins' house?" one neighbor would say. "How could they let something like that happen?" The martens struggled to shield Tolu from the judgmental stares and hurtful comments. They decided to focus on their family, determined to rebuild the trust and happiness they once shared. Despite the martens' best efforts, Tolu's trauma did not fade easily. His trust in people had been shattered, and his mind, once filled with dreams of flying high like the airplanes he admired, was now clouded with confusion and hurt. He spent more time alone, withdrawn from the world around him. His love for airplanes had turned into an escape fantasy, a dream he held onto for comfort. However, his mental and emotional scars deepened, and he began to act out in ways he couldn't fully explain. Tolu found himself searching for something that could fill the emptiness inside him, something that could erase the pain. He didn't understand it, but he found solace in unhealthy ways. The first encounter with temptation. One evening, Tolu was at the corner shop near their house, a place where children often hung out after school. As he passed by, a group of older boys called out to him, "Tolu, come here. We've got something that will make you feel good," one of them said, grinning. Tolu hesitated, unsure. The voices of his parents echoed in his head, telling him to be careful, to stay away from things that could harm him. But the loneliness, the hurt, and the need for escape made him give in. He stepped closer. The older boy handed him a small packet, offering him a taste of a substance he didn't fully understand but soon became addicted to, an illicit drug. Tolu didn't know the full consequences, but the numbness it brought him made the pain inside feel less sharp. It was the first of many steps down a dark path, the spiral into addiction. Days turned into weeks, and Tolu's escape from his pain through drugs became a regular habit. He couldn't focus on school anymore, and his grades slipped. He withdrew from his parents, not wanting them to see the change. Mama Tolu, though still deeply concerned, was hopeful that her son would bounce back from the trauma he'd faced. But she didn't know how deep Tolu's struggles went. Meanwhile, Tolu began to seek out dangerous crowds. He spent more time with those who offered him the substances that would numb his pain. The boys at the shop were no longer the only people he turned to for comfort. He found himself surrounded by others who lived in the shadows, embracing the destructive habits they had come to know. The desperation for more. Tolu's need for the escape grew. The drugs and the moments of fleeting joy they gave him weren't enough anymore. He craved more of the high, more of the oblivion. Soon, he found himself in the company of people who introduced him to yet another dark world. Sex. It started with casual encounters, risky and reckless. To Tolu, it seemed like just another way to forget his pain, to feel wanted in a way he had never felt before. He didn't understand the risks, nor did he fully comprehend the consequences of his actions. As he dove deeper into this world, the addiction grew stronger, and his self-destruction worsened. The first signs of HIV. Months passed, and Tolu's reckless lifestyle took its toll. One evening, after an encounter with one of his companions, Tolu felt an unusual discomfort. A few days later, he noticed painful sores on his skin and an overwhelming sense of fatigue. The joy he had once found in escaping his pain now seemed like a distant memory, replaced by a deep fear he couldn't shake. He tried to ignore it at first, but as his condition worsened, Tolu became terrified. He knew that something was wrong, but he didn't know what. One night, while sitting alone in his room, he gathered the courage to tell his parents, his voice shaking, "Mama, Papa, please don't forget to like, share, and hit the subscribe button. Drop comment for part 2.